He never watches TV, but every day he takes apart a brand new TV, then throws it straight down from the 35th floor, because he accidentally got trapped in this abandoned building. The whole point of doing this was just to get the security guard downstairs to notice, and come up to open the door for him, but the guard was listening to the radio, and never noticed at all. Seeing that throwing TVs didn't work, he shouted desperately for help, but that tiny sound up in the sky was barely audible at all. Yet the man had no plan to give up. He grabbed a metal basin, and while shouting he banged on the glass, just hoping the sound would travel down the wall. But by nighttime his throat was already hoarse, and the guard still never came to rescue him. The man fell into despair, but the next day he still unwillingly came to the door, trying to open it, but the key broke off, and the lock outside didn't budge at all. So he found a pair of pliers in the kitchen, trying to pry the doorknob open, but even with all his strength, the lock never moved a bit. Seeing it was hopeless, the man simply smashed it with the pliers, but after pounding for half a day, he only left a small scratch on the door, and even hurt his finger in the process. The man grew furious, and kicked the door hard with his right foot. He believed the foot that once kicked in the World Cup could surely kick this door open, but he didn't know. Half the funds of this building were spent on the main door, so instead he nearly broke his own leg, and only left a few footprints on it. At this point the man finally realized he lived in the information age. Wasn't a phone the best way to call for help? He quickly dialed a locksmith's number, but as always in movies, either there's no signal, or the phone dies. The man got the second outcome. Before he could even say his address, the phone shut off by itself. He hurried back to the room to plug in the charger, but of course the director wouldn't let him escape that easy. Sure enough, after just a few seconds, the whole room went dark. The man instantly regretted. He should never have trusted the broker's nonsense, saying the feng shui here was great, and that Cupid's star hovered above. As long as you lived here, you'd be guaranteed to find love within a month. Now look at him, trapped to death inside this place. Forget about finding love. Even getting out alive had become a problem. But right then, he thought of another way. He gathered up all the toothpaste from the bathroom, then wrote a rescue message on cardboard, and tossed it out from above. But because of the air current, the cardboard floated onto the roof. Yet the man refused to believe he'd stay this unlucky, so he wrote a second one. This time he stretched his arm far outside the window, hoping the cardboard would drift further out, but as it fell, it still landed on the roof. When he was about to write the third one, the toothpaste was gone, so in desperation, he ripped off the bandage on his hand, and squeezed hard on the wound. A blood letter was written that way. The man tossed it down, holding on to his last hope. This time the cardboard finally landed in a good spot. He was overwhelmed with excitement, believing that as soon as someone came up to grab their laundry, they'd see the note. So he sat by the window quietly waiting, but he ended up waiting the whole day. Finally his patience paid off. A woman came up to collect clothes. The man shouted to her desperately, but his hoarse voice made no sound. The woman only focused on folding clothes, and since it was already dark, she never noticed the note on the ground. As she was about to leave, the man panicked and banged the glass with his basin, but that tiny noise made no difference. This was his only chance to escape. He had to make her notice the note. The next day he gathered some materials, and made a slingshot, waiting for the woman to come for clothes. Meanwhile, the man pricked his finger and wrote another note, and tossed it to the security guard. But the guard as usual just lay there with his radio, never noticing the note. But right then the woman showed up again. Seeing this, the man quickly aimed the slingshot at her. This time he finally caught her attention, and she discovered the rescue note, while the man observed her every move from above. Seeing her walk his way, he was thrilled he was finally going to be saved, and rushed to the door, pounding on it. Soon the woman found the big door.
भाई साहब, ये स्वर्ग अपार्टमेंट है क्या? ये स्वर्ग अपार्टमेंट है?
हाँ।
यहाँ कोई रहता है?
कोई नहीं रहता।
कोई नहीं रहता यहाँ पे?
हमें 2 साल हो गए नौकरी करते हुए, इस बिल्डिंग में कोई नहीं रहता। अब जाइए।
Hearing this, the woman was confused, and turned to leave. The man was still pounding on the door waiting for rescue, but after a long while nothing happened. Seeing the woman's back as she left, he finally realized she never came up. In that moment he was filled with despair and helplessness. Then the man made a bold choice. He lit a torch, and burned the clothes tied to the window, hoping someone would see. But the flames weren't strong enough, so he tossed the mattress too. Seeing the fire blaze up, he jumped for joy, thinking with such a big commotion, someone would surely notice him. But as the fire spread, he grew anxious. What if no one came to help, and he burned to death instead? So he grabbed a pillow, and beat the flames like crazy. Thankfully he managed to put out the fire, avoiding disaster. But as time passed, he faced a new problem: food and water. There had been water at first, but when the man saw a rat, terrified he tried to run, and knocked himself out on a column. When he woke again, the faucet had been running all night. He wanted to shut it off, but fear of the rat kept him from stepping forward. forward, so all the water drained away. If only he'd been braver back then, he wouldn't now be searching for water. The man lifted the toilet lid. Though there was water inside, his disgust kept him from drinking. Helpless, he tore apart the water heater, praying for some leftovers inside, but after tipping it for ages not a drop came out. Just then the guard finally saw the note. He looked up, then turned and went back to his radio. Meanwhile the man was so dehydrated, he nearly collapsed. That's when he spotted a cockroach. He almost grabbed it, but again his mind stopped him, and he pulled back. Then he staggered to his feet, looking for food, when suddenly it started to rain. He couldn't believe his eyes, thinking it was a hallucination, until the drops soaked his skin. Then he snapped out of it, quickly setting a basin outside to catch water. It had been so long since he drank like that. To save the precious rainwater, he gathered every container in the room, even the toilet lid, and used pipes to rig a storage setup. He even dragged over the fridge. At last his water problem was solved. Now if only he had food, it'd be perfect. The next day he found a lost sparrow. Closing his eyes tight, he shot it with his slingshot. After 5 days trapped, he finally had his first warm meal. Once he regained his strength, his confidence to escape came back. Better to rely on himself. He decided to saw open the bars, but the titanium steel pipes were unbreakable. He sawed all the way into the night with no progress, so he tried burning them with fire. After a whole day and night, only a tiny mark was left. The man couldn't take it anymore. He put on the shoes he'd been saving, and kicked the bars hard. He finally succeeded. The man forced the bars apart with all his strength, and crawled out without hesitation, because now there was nothing left to fear. He used the bars to climb down step by step. If he could reach the 30th floor he'd be safe. He remembered from before when he toured the place, that the 30th floor had no bars, and if the door wasn't locked, he could get out. Soon he reached the 31st floor. He tried to lower his foot, but pulled it back quickly, because there was no foothold. But soon he had an idea. He pulled out his belt, and tied it to the lowest bar. He believed the belt could hold his weight. After all, it had cost him a month's wages. Once he made sure it was tight, he slowly climbed down. When his last hand let go, his feet landed on the railing below. Standing steady, he finally dared to release the belt. Then he pressed his hands against the wall, and slid sideways step by step. Every step had to be careful, because one fall would mean death. Finally he reached the edge. He adjusted his position, and swung himself onto the balcony. He thought he was free at last, but the window was locked. No problem. There was nothing a good kick couldn't solve. In a few blows he shattered one. Then with nervous anticipation, he walked to the door. After all the danger, he finally escaped the cursed place. He didn't dare waste a second, and ran straight downstairs, afraid of being trapped again. Once outside he glanced at the guard fiddling with the radio, but he didn't blame him. Maybe the old man really just never heard. Then with great relief, he left the building behind, telling himself he'd never rent a place so carelessly again.